We have a fantastic program for you today, but I want to start with sharing some information with you regarding the evolving situation, which does not look too promising. Now, we spoke to some people high up in the government who keep a very close eye on how things are happening. And I'm going to share some assessments with you based on our conversations. The first important development is that there is a clear realization within the Pakistani government that the Americans are willing to talk, but the Iranians are a bit reluctant. Now, perhaps this is understandable if you look at it from the perspective of those people who feel that Iran, now that it is actually in the conflict, might as well go all the way. But the fact is that the Americans have actually, in many ways, agreed for some sort of a negotiation to happen in Pakistan. And Pakistanis were initially talking to Steve Witkoff, who is President Trump's special envoy, but now that level has been increased to Vice President J.D. Vance. So if and when talks do happen in Pakistan, chances are that J.D. Vance would actually represent the US. But that will only happen when Iran agrees to it. So far, Pakistani officials say that the response from the Iranians is still awaited. It has not come. And in fact, in some ways, that's a cause of some disappointment also, because Pakistan really wants these talks to go ahead so that the conflict can find some sort of a solution, but that is not happening. And one of the reasons, possibly, again, this is the assessment from well-informed officials, is that the chain of command when it comes to decision-making in Iran is not very clear. There is a political leadership, of course, led by President Pezeshkian and the Foreign Minister Arakchi, but then the IRGC, High Command, is really calling the shots, which essentially means that it is they who decide the policy right now, even though we are hearing that there's a lot of decentralization when it comes to Iran, which is a fact, but key decisions are apparently being made by the IRGC, and therefore there is a lack of clarity in terms of whether they really want to negotiate at this stage, they want to negotiate at a later stage, or they just want to keep the war going. The other important factor at this stage is the approach of the GCC countries. Now, as we all know, they are being targeted by Iran and targeted regularly, and they faced a lot of damage, a lot of destruction, and I think it might not be wrong to say that they are the ones who are losing out the most, other than, of course, Iran, who's bearing the brunt of the damage. But for the GCC countries, the economies have taken a huge hit. Everybody agrees that it's going to take a long while for them to recover. So the GCC countries now, what we are hearing from well-informed people here is that the GCC countries also are not too much in favor of a negotiated settlement at this stage. They feel that an Iran which is wounded and angry would be of a far greater threat to them than it is today. So therefore, they want more radical action. Now, this is very disturbing to hear also, but the reality is that at this particular stage, the GCC countries are probably not too interested in a diplomatic solution, which makes things difficult or more challenging for Pakistan, because as we all know, Pakistan is in the forefront of trying to find a diplomatic solution, and it is so far very successfully maintaining a neutral balance, a neutral stance when it comes to this very difficult situation. So that's where we are now. As I said, we've been told that Pakistan is a bit disappointed because I think if the Iranians agree at this point that they want to at least start meeting face to face, the Americans would be willing, but that's not happening right now. The important meeting that happened in Islamabad with the so-called Quad, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt and Pakistan, hosted by Pakistan, of course, When that meeting finished, our sources tell us, senior officials tell us that the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi called up our Foreign Minister Isagdar, Deputy Prime Minister, and said that he wanted to be briefed in person, or he would like, or he requested that he be briefed in person about the talks, to which, of course, given our very special relationship, Mr. Isagdar flew to Beijing, where they had a meeting, and of course at the end of that we saw that statement coming out, which clearly states that Pakistan and China are united in terms of how they see this conflict ending. Now, this brings us to a very unoptimistic or slightly alarming conclusion. And that conclusion is that the people or the countries that actually want this war to continue outnumber those who want this conflict to end. And of course, I don't mean in terms of all the countries in the world, but the most relevant countries. Clearly, from the assessments that we are hearing, Iran seems to be digging in its heels and probably wants to take the fight to the Americans and the Israelis. This is reinforced by the story by CNN today, which says very clearly that intelligence reports from the US say that Iran still retains more than half of their missile launchers, which means that their capacity, their capability to stay in the fight is very much there. So if Iran wants to stay in the fight, if the GCC countries don't want a diplomatic solution now and want Iran to be weakened much more, if Israel wants to continue the war so it can damage all the countries within the Gulf and West Asia much more, then that pretty much leaves only the Americans, who are looking for an off-ramp, and Pakistan, who's trying to formulate and construct that off-ramp, and China, that is helping Pakistan get that off-ramp into operation. That's the situation right now, and it does not fill you with too much hope. We need to continue hoping, because ultimately at some point the conflict will end, and as all conflicts do, it ends with talking. And when it comes to talking, we've got some more interesting talking points for you. And my talking point today deals with denial. And I think one person who represents this denial more than other people today is the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Yesterday, Mr. Trump told the world that the conflict in the Middle East and attacks on Iran would last for another 2 to 3 weeks. He confidently stated that Iran's Air Force, Navy, missile launchers and leadership have been completely decimated, and he's been saying this over and over again. But there were more objectives that the United States and Israel needed to accomplish. He again declared victory in the conflict, and it seems that Mr. Trump, his Secretary of War, and his surrogates are the only ones who share this sentiment about the conflict. They are, so it seems, convinced that they are winning. And in a stark and alarming development, the Secretary of War fired a dozen generals last evening, including the US Army Chief of Staff Randy George. This does not seem like a victorious force, which the President insists it is. Experts like Dr. John Mersheimer, who I spoke to recently, they disagree strongly about the way that this war is going.
It's very important to understand that Iran is winning the war, and that Iran has a vested interest in not ending the war until it gets what it demands.
Interestingly, moments after the speech in which Mr. Trump declared that Iran's missile infrastructure had been decimated, Iran launched attacks on Israel and US assets in the GCC countries. Denial never, ever helps. And the more you move away from reality, the heavier the consequences are of questionable decisions. But one thing that you cannot deny or bomb or decimate is always the market. Although Mr. Trump has tried periodically to influence the market pricing of oil by hinting at the end of the conflict, the market seems to have started ignoring the American president. The market is not in denial of the reality of the conflict, that this is not coming to an end anytime soon, as I said earlier. And that even if the end comes today, the supply chains will take weeks and months to be fully restored back to their pre-conflict states. The price, in response to Mr. Trump's speech, rose to its highest levels since 2008. There is also, by the way, been a sell-off in equities. Bond yields are rising. So are mortgage rates. Along with petrol prices in the US and in most parts of the world, including, as we all know, Pakistan. Inflation will impact almost everyone in the world because the US president is in denial of all that is happening. And it seems to be in denial of the reality that nothing much is expected to change in the next 3 weeks. Only more damage to Iran's civilian structure, perhaps more damage to GCC energy infrastructure, and most certainly more civilian loss of life. There have already been more than 2,000 civilians casualties in Iran since the start of this conflict. So one thing is for sure, the geopolitics in the region may have changed forever. According to our recent discussion with Dr. Robert Pape, Iran is positioned to be the major power in the Middle East in the future.
It's a game of geopolitics, sir. So it's not just bombs on a battlefield now. There's a whole level that has changed, and it's changed because of Iran's power. Its control over the Strait of Hormuz, which equals more oil than any other country on the planet.
President spoke Straits of Hormuz in his address. He basically told everyone affected to go get the oil, to clean up the mess that this war has created.
I have a suggestion. Number one, buy oil from the United States of America. We have plenty. We have so much. And number two, build up some delayed courage. Should have done it before. Should have done it with us, as we asked. Go to the Strait and just take it, protect it, use it for yourselves. Iran has been...
In response to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the disruption of oil supplies, the Europeans are planning an intervention. And this is an important development. British Foreign Minister Yvette Cooper will chair the virtual meeting of about 35 countries, including France, Germany, Italy, Canada, and the UAE around midday in London to explore ways to restore freedom of navigation in the area. The US, please note this, the US will not be part of this meeting. That's pretty amazing. As reported earlier, Pakistan has been involved in mediation between the United States and Iran, along with Turkey, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. Pakistan's Foreign Minister, Mr. Ishaq Dar, traveled to Beijing in this regard. A 5-point joint statement, as you remember, was issued which called for ceasefire, peace talks, protection of civilian targets, opening of shipping routes, and the primacy of the UN Charter. In a very crucial development, a representative of the Chinese Foreign Ministry did not mince words and clearly stated that the current crisis is a result of the US-Israel attack on Iran. So there you have it, the world's second largest economy, clearly putting the responsibility of the crisis on its initiators and aggressors. The Chinese, with all their power and political influence, are not susceptible to the supply chain disruption. Perhaps the most crucial one is the disruption of their LNG supplies for Qatar. Time will tell how much of its weight China is going to throw around to bring a resolution to this conflict. Things are only going to get worse with time, and there is no denial in that. And back home in Pakistan, the government was finally forced to increase petrol and diesel prices after 3 weeks to unprecedented levels. Instead of periodic increases over the last few weeks and trying to absorb the international prices through subsidies, the government was perhaps forced to take the step due to the mammoth oil price increase in the international market. This increase is expected to affect prices across the board for commodities and utilities and groceries. So here we are. Pakistan is having to pay record prices of petrol. Europeans trying to get the strait open. The Chinese stressing an immediate ceasefire. The GCC countries trying to manage their damaged energy facilities, and the Iranians desperately trying to survive indiscriminate bombing and threats to their civilian infrastructure. All because the US president is in denial of reality and the clear and present consequences. Consequences which no one is immune to, not even the American president.